Imagine waking up one day to find your life turned upside down by something you never did. You get a call that the police are on their way to your house. They say you've been accused of stealing not just a few things, but 72 cherry trees from your neighbor's yard. At first, you think it's a mistake, a weird mix-up that will clear up quickly. But then, it gets worse. The police arrive, handcuff you, and take you away. All because someone said you stole those trees. It sounds unbelievable, right? Like something from a movie. But it really happened. Now, think about how that feels. Being arrested in front of your family and neighbors for something you didn't do. How would you prove your innocence when the accusation is so big? 72 cherry trees are not small. They're big, noticeable, and valuable. The thought of being blamed for such a huge crime would scare anyone. Would you stay silent and hope it goes away? Or would you stand up and fight? This is where the story gets interesting. Instead of giving up, instead of being crushed by the shock and fear, the person in this story decided to take action. To fight back. Because sometimes, the truth alone isn't enough. Sometimes you have to be loud, strong, and brave to clear your name. Imagine how hard it is to prove you didn't steal something that disappeared from your neighbor's yard, especially when they already called the police and got you arrested. But why would the neighbors accuse someone of stealing 72 cherry trees in the first place? Was there some bad blood? A long-running argument? Or was it just a mistake that got way out of hand? The reasons behind such wild accusations are often complicated. Sometimes neighbors don't get along, and things escalate quickly. Sometimes jealousy, anger, or misunderstandings push people to do things they might regret later. And sometimes, it's all a big lie. Picture the stress of being taken in by the police, the fear of what might happen next, and the humiliation of being labeled a thief in your own community. People would start looking at you differently, maybe even judging you without knowing the full story. Your reputation could be ruined in an instant. That's a heavy burden for anyone to carry. But what if there was a way to fight back? What if instead of letting the accusation ruin your life, you could turn things around? This is the story of someone who did just that. Who faced those dark moments and refused to be defeated. Who used the law to protect themselves and demand justice. It's a story about standing up when everything feels like it's falling apart. You might wonder, how did it end? Did the truth finally come out? Did justice win? And what lessons can we learn from this wild, unbelievable situation? Stick around, because this story isn't just about stolen trees. It's about courage, truth, and fighting back when the odds are stacked against you. It's about what happens when neighbors turn into enemies, and how one person stood their ground in the face of false accusations that threatened everything they had. It all started quietly, like any ordinary day in a quiet neighborhood. But beneath the calm surface, tensions were brewing between me and my neighbors. We'd had small disagreements before, nothing major, but nothing prepared me for what was about to happen. One day, I noticed something strange. My neighbor's cherry trees, which had stood tall and beautiful just days before, were suddenly missing. Not one or two, but dozens, 72 trees gone without a trace. It was shocking. Naturally, I was confused and concerned. I knew those trees had been there, and now they weren't. When I asked around, the neighbors were quick to blame me. They said I had taken the trees, chopped them down, and stolen them. It was an accusation so wild and so specific, it felt like a nightmare. I had no idea how they could think I did something like that. The worst part? They weren't just accusing me quietly. They took their claim straight to the police. Without giving me a chance to explain or defend myself, they painted me as a criminal. I couldn't believe it. How could this happen over trees? But in their eyes, I was the guilty party. They were sure I was the one responsible for the missing cherry trees. And because of that, I was arrested. The day the police came was surreal. I was at home, going about my usual routine when there was a knock at the door. 2 officers stood there, and before I knew it, I was handcuffed and led out in front of neighbors and strangers alike. It was humiliating and frightening. The community I thought I belonged to suddenly looked at me with suspicion. I wasn't just someone accused anymore, I was the thief. The arrest was public, embarrassing, and felt completely unjust. The cherry trees themselves were more than just plants. They were symbols of peace, beauty, and a part of the neighborhood's charm. To be accused of stealing them was to be accused of destroying something everyone valued. The stakes felt enormous. How could I prove that I had nothing to do with their disappearance? What made things even more difficult was how fast the rumor spread. People who barely knew me started whispering behind my back. Friends and acquaintances became distant. The assumption of guilt was already cemented in many minds. I had to fight not only the legal battle but also the battle to protect my reputation. But I wasn't going to let this be the end of my story. I knew that something had to be done, not just to clear my name but to hold the real culprits accountable. I began collecting everything I could: photos, witness statements, anything to show where I was when the trees disappeared. It was a long, stressful process. There were moments when I doubted if anyone would believe me. The neighbor's accusation didn't just hurt me, it hurt my entire family. The emotional toll was heavy. Sleepless nights, constant worry, and the strain of dealing with law enforcement became my new reality. I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for my life and my peace of mind. This situation taught me a lot about how quickly things can spiral out of control. One moment you're living your life peacefully, and the next, you're fighting for your freedom and your good name. The neighborhood, once a place of comfort, felt like a battleground. But deep down, I knew I couldn't give up. Because sometimes, when you're wrongly accused, your only choice is to fight back harder than ever before. The moment I was taken into custody, everything felt surreal. I kept asking myself, how did this happen? How did it come to this? Being handcuffed in front of my own home was humiliating, but what hit me hardest was the look in the eyes of people around me: neighbors, friends, even strangers who suddenly saw me as a criminal. The police officers didn't know me, and all they had was the complaint from my neighbors. I felt trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Sitting in that cold, sterile holding cell, I had plenty of time to think. I replayed the events that led me here over and over. I remembered the cherry trees, the accusations, the shock. But most of all, I thought about how to prove my innocence. The fear wasn't just about being arrested, it was about how this would affect my future. What if this charge stuck? What if people never believed me? The arrest came with a wave of unexpected consequences. First, there was the official paperwork, the charges, and the beginning of a legal process I wasn't prepared for. I had to navigate court dates, paperwork, and legal jargon that felt overwhelming. I wasn't a criminal, but I suddenly had to act like one: hiring a lawyer, gathering evidence, preparing a defense. Everything was upside down. Then there was the social impact. Word traveled fast. Suddenly, my name was linked to a serious crime in the neighborhood. People who once greeted me with a smile now avoided eye contact. Conversations stopped when I approached. The trust one had built over years felt shattered in a moment. The feeling of isolation was crushing. It wasn't just about the trees anymore, it was about my identity, my dignity. Despite the pressure, I refused to let fear control me. I began documenting everything related to the case. I collected receipts proving where I was on the days the trees disappeared. I found neighbors who could vouch for me, people who had seen me working on my own property, nowhere near the cherry trees. Every little detail mattered. I knew the truth was on my side, but the burden of proof was mine to carry. The process dragged on. Every meeting with my lawyer reminded me that this wasn't just a simple dispute, it was serious. The accusation wasn't about a small mistake, it was a major theft, according to the claim. I could feel the weight of those 72 trees hanging over me like a storm cloud. Meanwhile, my neighbors remained quiet when asked about evidence. Their story was firm: I was guilty. But they offered no proof. It was their word against mine. The police had acted quickly on their complaint, but the real investigation hadn't started yet. I remember feeling frustrated. How could I be arrested and treated like a criminal with no real evidence? The system seemed stacked against me, and it was exhausting to fight alone. Yet, I also felt a growing determination. I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting to clear my name and stop this false accusation from ruining my life. The arrest was just the beginning of a long battle. It opened up a world of challenges I never expected. But it also sparked something inside me, a refusal to be silenced or defeated. The truth was mine to protect, and I was ready to do whatever it took. After the arrest, I realized that staying silent wouldn't get me anywhere. I had to take action, not just to protect myself but to fight back against the false accusations that threatened to destroy my life. So, I made the decision to sue my neighbors for $3 million. It wasn't just about the money, it was about standing up for the truth and making sure they understood there are serious consequences for lies and false claims. Filing a lawsuit isn't something you decide lightly. It's complicated, time-consuming, and emotionally draining. I had to find the right lawyer who believed in my case, someone who was willing to fight with me. Together, we started gathering evidence, not just to prove I wasn't responsible for the missing cherry trees but also to show the damage their accusations caused me. The emotional pain, the damage to my reputation, the financial stress, it all mattered. As we prepared the lawsuit, I began to understand just how deep this conflict had gone. This wasn't just about some trees anymore. It was about trust broken between neighbors, a fight for justice, and a battle to protect my name. Every document we filed, every statement we collected, was another step closer to proving my innocence. One of the hardest parts was reliving the whole experience over and over. Each detail, each moment, had to be explained clearly and calmly. It was exhausting to dig up the stress and fear I had buried. But I knew it was necessary. The court needed to see the full picture, the false accusation, the wrongful arrest, and the real impact on my life. My lawyer helped me build a strong case. We gathered photos, witness statements, and even expert opinions. Neighbors who supported me came forward. We showed where I was when the trees disappeared and pointed out inconsistencies in the accusations against me. Step by step, we chipped away at the story my neighbors had told the police. It wasn't easy. The other side fought hard, too. They wanted to keep me pinned as the criminal. Courtroom battles are often like wars of words and evidence, and this case was no different. There were tense moments, long meetings, and plenty of back and forth. But with every challenge, I felt more determined to see this through. The lawsuit was also a way to send a message. False accusations can ruin lives. They can make someone lose their job, their friends, their peace of mind. I wanted to make it clear that such behavior wouldn't be ignored or tolerated. If someone accuses you falsely, you have the right to fight back, and justice can be served. Throughout the process, I kept reminding myself why I started this fight. It wasn't just about the trees or the money, it was about standing up for what was right. It was about reclaiming my life and refusing to be defined by lies. The legal battle was tough, but it gave me a chance to take control of the story that had been twisted against me. Filing the lawsuit was a turning point. It marked the moment when I stopped being a victim and became a fighter. The path ahead was still long and uncertain, but I was ready. I knew that in court, truth and evidence mattered most, and I had both on my side. When the lawsuit was officially filed, everything became real. There was no turning back. My neighbors, the same people who had waved at me from across the street for years, were now defendants in a $3 million defamation case. Their reaction? Pure denial. They acted like they had done nothing wrong. Like accusing me of stealing 72 cherry trees and getting me arrested was no big deal. But now, they were the ones being held accountable, and I was ready to see it through. As the case moved forward, things got intense. We entered the discovery phase, where both sides had to provide documents, records, and witness lists. My lawyer and I spent hours reviewing police reports, neighborhood surveillance footage, and text messages. Every piece of evidence mattered. We even found proof that they had no solid basis for their claim in the first place, just assumptions and guesses, built on who knows what. Their story kept changing. First, they said they saw me near the trees. Then, they claimed they heard machinery coming from my property. But when asked for actual evidence, they had nothing. No photos. No video. No witnesses. Just words. On the other hand, we had receipts showing I had rented no equipment. We had timestamps showing I wasn't even home when the trees supposedly went missing. It was lie after lie, and finally, we were exposing it all. I remember walking into the courtroom for the first hearing. My hands were cold, my heart racing. Even though I knew I was innocent, I couldn't help but feel nervous. It's strange how, even when the truth is on your side, the courtroom can make you feel small. But once the facts started coming out, I saw the shift. The judge listened. The mood in the room changed. I could tell the truth was starting to sink in. We had neighbors testify, ones who had nothing to gain, just regular people who told the court what they'd seen and heard. Some of them said they'd never seen me near the cherry trees. Others confirmed that the trees had been in poor condition and may have been removed by the owners themselves or even by a hired crew. Suddenly, the whole picture started to look different. My neighbor's story wasn't adding up. But it wasn't just about proving they were wrong. We also had to show how much their actions had damaged me. That meant opening up about things I didn't like talking about, how I lost a freelance contract because of the arrest, how my kids were bullied at school, how I couldn't sleep for weeks. It was hard to put those things into words, but the truth had to be told. Every lie they spread had left a mark on my life. And yet, even as the pressure mounted, I kept showing up. I knew I couldn't stop now. This wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. It was about setting the record straight and making sure they didn't do this to anyone else. The court process was slow, frustrating, and full of surprises, but I stayed focused. I was no longer defending myself, I was demanding justice. As the trial continued, something unexpected started happening. The neighbors who had once been so confident, so loud about their accusations, began to look nervous. Their answers during questioning didn't match what they had told the police earlier. Their story, which once sounded so clear and certain, now came off shaky and full of gaps. My lawyer knew exactly where to press. With each cross-examination, the truth started cracking through the lies. One neighbor claimed they had seen me with a chainsaw near the trees. But under oath, they admitted they never actually saw me cutting anything. They assumed it was me. Another said they heard trucks coming from my driveway. But they had no photo, no video, just a vague memory. We even showed that my security cameras didn't catch anything unusual on those dates. If anything, it proved I wasn't doing anything wrong. What shocked everyone the most was when we uncovered that my neighbors had recently been involved in another neighborhood dispute. This wasn't the first time they had accused someone of something outrageous. They had a history of stirring up drama, filing complaints, and causing trouble for others. That information changed everything. Suddenly, they weren't just accusers, they were unreliable. Their credibility was fading fast. Meanwhile, my lawyer presented a clear timeline of where I was, what I was doing, and how I couldn't have possibly been involved in taking the trees. Witnesses backed it up. Even my phone data supported my alibi. Every detail we presented made their story fall apart more. The judge was paying close attention. You could feel the shift in the room. For the first time in months, I felt like people were starting to see the truth. But it wasn't just the legal side of things that started changing. People in the neighborhood who once avoided me now stopped to talk. Some even apologized for believing the rumors. It was like the fog of lies was finally lifting. I wasn't just defending myself in court, I was getting my life back, one step at a time. Still, it wasn't easy to sit there every day and listen to people who once smiled at me now try to destroy my character. They spoke with fake confidence, but I knew they were scared. And they should be. Because everything they did, the false police report, the lies to the community, the damage to my name, was coming back at them, legally and publicly. Throughout all of this, I kept thinking about why they did it. Was it jealousy? Some long-standing grudge? Or just a desperate attempt to pin the blame on someone because they didn't want to admit they lost those trees on their own? Maybe they thought I was an easy target. Maybe they didn't expect me to fight back. But I did. I fought back hard. And now, they were the ones being exposed, one lie at a time. The courtroom was no longer their shield, it became a place where the truth had a voice, and I finally had a chance to use mine. The final days of the trial were the most intense. Every seat in the courtroom was filled. People from the neighborhood, reporters, and even some who didn't know me at all had come to see how this would end. It felt like everyone was holding their breath. My lawyer stood tall and confident, ready to deliver the closing arguments. After everything we had gone through, it all came down to this. As my side laid out the facts one last time, I felt every piece of our case land like a hammer. The timeline, the witnesses, the evidence, it all painted one clear picture. I wasn't just innocent. I had been targeted, lied about, and dragged through the mud for something I didn't do. My neighbors, on the other hand, had no solid proof, no consistent story, and no real explanation for why they had accused me in the first place. Their faces said it all, they were no longer in control. The judge listened carefully. No interruptions. No reactions. Just silence. But in that silence, I could feel the weight of everything that had happened. The arrest. The embarrassment. The sleepless nights. The legal bills. The shame my family had to carry for something that wasn't even real. All of that was finally being seen. Finally being heard. Then came their closing argument. They tried to twist things again, saying they acted out of concern. That they were just doing what they thought was right. But the damage had been done. Concern doesn't lead to false arrests. It doesn't involve making up stories or ignoring evidence. It was clear they were only trying to save face, now that the truth had been laid bare. After both sides spoke, there was nothing left to do but wait. The hours crawled by. Every minute felt longer than the last. I sat there, trying to stay calm, trying not to think about how much this had cost me, not just in money, but in trust and peace of mind. My family sat beside me, holding hands, not saying a word. We were all just waiting. Finally, the judge returned. The room went silent. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Then came the words that would change everything. I didn't even realize I had stopped breathing until I heard it. The judgment was in our favor. The court recognized that the accusations were false. That the arrest had no basis. That my neighbors were responsible for the damage they caused. The moment I heard it, I didn't feel angry anymore, I felt relief. Deep, quiet relief. Like a huge weight had finally been lifted. People in the courtroom looked at me differently now. Some nodded. Some even smiled. My name had been cleared. The lies were exposed. But even more than that, I had shown what happens when someone stands up to injustice and refuses to be broken. What came next wasn't about revenge. It was about what justice really means when you've been wronged and you don't back down. Once the judgment was announced, everything changed, but not all at once. At first, there was a strange stillness. My neighbors avoided eye contact as they left the courtroom. No apologies. No explanations. Just quiet exits, like they couldn't face what they'd done. But I wasn't looking for an apology anymore. They had every chance to tell the truth. Instead, they dragged me through months of stress, shame, and public humiliation. Now, they had to live with the consequences. The news spread quickly. Local media picked up the story. Headlines told the tale of a man falsely accused, arrested over cherry trees, and ultimately victorious in court. People who had judged me without knowing the facts now saw the truth. I started getting calls and messages from people I hadn't heard from in months, some apologizing, others just reaching out to say they believed me now. It felt strange, but also healing. The silence that had followed me everywhere was finally breaking. Back in the neighborhood, things felt different. Not better. Just quieter. The people who had kept their distance now nodded when they saw me. Some even stopped to talk. There were still those who pretended like nothing had happened, which was fine. I didn't need their approval. What I had needed was justice, and I had it. The $3 million lawsuit wasn't just a number. It stood for everything I had lost and fought to reclaim. But money doesn't erase the past. I still remembered the look on my kids' faces when I was arrested. I still remembered lying awake at night, wondering how I'd fix my reputation. I remembered feeling powerless, like my voice didn't matter. That memory stuck with me, even as things began to return to normal. I had won in court, but I couldn't forget how quickly things had spiraled just because someone pointed a finger and lied. Still, I started rebuilding. I went back to work. I saw friends again. My kids began to smile more. Slowly, the tension in our house faded. We didn't talk about the case every day anymore. We talked about plans. about the future. There was a sense of peace in our home again. That feeling, more than anything, reminded me why I fought so hard. Not just for my name, but for them. For our life. Even after everything, part of me still wonders why they did it. What made them so certain it was me? Was it jealousy? Resentment? Did they think I wouldn't fight back? Or maybe they just didn't care who got hurt as long as they had someone to blame. I may never get the full answer. But I've learned something important. When you're innocent, and you know the truth, you have to stand up for yourself even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. What happened to me could have happened to anyone. One accusation, one lie, and your whole life can flip upside down. But I also learned something else. The truth has power. And when you fight with everything you've got, sometimes that's enough to turn everything around. After the verdict, life didn't just snap back into place. The trial was over, but the emotional mess it left behind took time to clean up. I still got stares at the grocery store. People still whispered. Winning the case didn't erase the months I spent being judged, talked about, avoided. It didn't stop the replay in my mind of that moment I was handcuffed in front of my house. But slowly, things started to feel real again. Safe again. I spent weeks just trying to breathe normally. Not flinching every time my phone rang. Not checking my windows to see if someone was watching. The fear doesn't go away overnight. It lingers. And even though justice was on my side, there's this deep sense of caution that sticks with you after something like that. You become careful about who you trust. You start noticing who stood by you and who didn't. Some of the neighbors who believed the worst never said a word. They just went back to their routines like nothing ever happened. But others surprised me. One man, who had once avoided eye contact with me, walked over one morning while I was trimming hedges. He apologized. He said he should have asked me directly before jumping to conclusions. He looked ashamed. And honestly, that moment mattered more than I expected. Not because I needed his apology, but because it reminded me that not everyone is beyond reason. I got invited back to community events, which felt strange at first. Like being welcomed into a place I had never actually left. I could feel people watching me differently now. Not with suspicion, but curiosity. Maybe even a little respect. I wasn't just that guy who got arrested for the trees anymore. I was the guy who fought back. Who didn't fold. Who cleared his name. That experience changed the way I saw everything. It showed me how fragile a person's reputation really is. How quickly people will believe a lie if it fits their expectations. And how important it is to stand your ground when everything feels like it's falling apart. I'd never been in a courtroom before this. Never thought I'd have to defend myself against something so absurd. But life doesn't always play fair, and you have to be ready to fight when it doesn't. The lawsuit money helped. Of course it did. It covered the legal bills, the therapy sessions for my kids, the lost income. But more than that, it gave me a sense of closure. Like I had something to show for everything we'd been through. It wasn't just about punishment, it was about balance. About taking back control of a story that had once been ripped from my hands. Now, when I walk through the neighborhood, I walk with my head up. I don't hide anymore. I don't avoid anyone. I don't feel like a prisoner in my own life. That part of my story, the fear, the doubt, the anger, is behind me. What lies ahead is something I get to write on my own terms. There was one last thing I had to do, something I'd been putting off. I needed to visit the place where all of this had started, the edge of the property, where the cherry trees used to stand. For months, I had avoided going there. Every time I looked in that direction, I thought about the accusations, the arrest, the whispers from behind curtains. That line of trees, or what was left of them, had become a symbol of everything I lost. But now, I needed to face it. I walked over there early one morning, just after sunrise. The sky was quiet, the street still. There were only a few tree stumps left, half covered in weeds, forgotten like the lie that tried to bury me. It was strange how something so simple, just trees, could cause such chaos in a person's life. I stood there for a long time, not moving, just breathing. It didn't feel like a crime scene anymore. It felt like closure. As I looked at the empty space, I realized how much had changed. Not just around me, but inside me. I wasn't the same person I was before this happened. I had learned to fight, to speak up, to not let fear silence me. I had faced public humiliation, betrayal by people I once trusted, and the cold grip of injustice. And I had come out on the other side. Stronger. Wiser. Sharper. But the memory of being arrested was still vivid. The knock on the door. The officer's voice. My kids watching from the window, too confused to even cry. That kind of trauma doesn't leave easily. Even now, every time I hear sirens, my heart races for a second before my brain reminds me it's over. It takes time to unlearn fear. Even longer to rebuild trust in people, in systems, in the idea that the truth will win. Some people told me I should move, leave the neighborhood behind and start fresh. But I didn't. I stayed. Because I didn't want to run. I didn't want their lies to push me out of the life I had built. My home, my memories, my routines, I fought to protect those things. And I still am. Every day I wake up here is a quiet reminder that I took back what was mine. My neighbors. Most of them don't say much anymore. They stay on their side of the street, and I stay on mine. That's fine with me. I don't need fake smiles or forced conversations. What I need is peace, and I've found that, at least in pieces. There's something powerful about silence when it's finally yours. Sometimes I wonder if they regret it. If they think back to the day they made that call, filed that report, told those lies. Maybe they do. Or maybe they don't care. But it doesn't matter anymore. Because now, I walk past that empty stretch of land not as a suspect, not as a victim, but as someone who stood in the fire and didn't let it burn him down.